Cool. Welcome everybody who is online, and if you're watching on video, welcome as well. So this week we're going to talk about wireframing, and you probably got the question already in your mind, what is wireframing? If you already know, then some of this might be a bit basic, but we're going to explore that in a minute. But before we do, somebody said last time, can I just convert a QuarkXPress document into a WordPress theme? And I said at the time, it's possible, but it's not necessarily simple. And I just want to explain how you do that, because it leads straight into talking about wireframing. So before you go any further, you need something like MAMP. Now, MAMP is a web server on your desktop by means of which you can create WordPress and all kinds of other things. And before you even start, you've got all these decisions to make about which version of PHP you're using, dynamic DNS and so on. And then you can create a WordPress instance. Once you've done that, I've actually done a couple of websites. I did one based on the one we looked at in the very first week, and that worked great. So I did it as a flex and then converted it into WordPress using Pinegrow Theme Converter, which is what you can see on the screen now. And if you thought MAMP looked complicated, and I know it's blurry on the screen, but don't worry about that, because the stuff that looks complicated really is. You've got to choose for each element what kind of WordPress thing that's going to be. So if that thing that I've just clicked on is going to be a featured image, and you come down here, and again it looks blurry, but don't worry about that. Then you click for make it a post, make it a site title, and you can then export this using export the theme to your WordPress instance via MAMP. And then you can look at it on your, so it's a really simple site I just created in 5 minutes to show you. That's the Quark Flex version. And actually, if you go back to the theme converter, you can actually look at the way it responds in different sizes. That's great, all flexing working. And that's great. And then you go finally to WordPress. And there it is on your themes. And you can then activate that. And the first one I did worked great. And the one I did for the demonstration didn't work at all. And that's not because there's a fault in Quark or a fault in Pinegrow WordPress Theme Converter, which is only a few dollars a month. It's a subscription. Nor is it because there's a fault in MAMP or in WordPress. It's just that WordPress is now so complicated that you've got to make hundreds of decisions when you convert the theme. And although the guys who sell this theme converter say it's really easy, actually it isn't that easy. And what's more, WordPress keeps changing. When I loaded up WordPress for this, it said WordPress 6 is available. And wow, this is so complicated. Now, don't despair at this point, because it brings us straight on to what we're talking about today, which is wireframing. So wireframing is what you do when you're contemplating a big web project. And although it is possible with enough technical knowledge to quickly create something in QuarkXPress and quickly convert it with Pinegrow Theme Converter, and then quickly check it out in MAMP, and then quickly upload it, in reality, these projects take months and they take lots of people, and very often they go wrong. And one way to stop it going wrong is by wireframing. And wireframing is essentially doing dummies of your website in order to show people, get buy-in, have people understand it, decide what you want to do. And you probably work through several of these. Now, the last time I did a huge website was back in, it's 10 years ago now. It was for a major hospital in the UK. And we were spending a very large amount of money on it, which had been donated by the web company, as they were hoping that somebody else would then take on the website. So it didn't cost the health service much, but it was still a huge project. It took a whole year. And the things about that project are still true. Technology is extended, it's advanced, but it's not advanced so much that those issues aren't there anymore. So let's just talk about why wireframe for a second. So I hope you can kind of read this. When you're creating a big website, some or more of the following are always true. So the user requirements are incompletely understood. People come to you and say, we need a website which will do the following. And then the next week, somebody else comes to you and says, I hear you're doing the new website project. It needs to do the following. And it's a different following. It's a different requirement. Then you've got where market research or product development is still taking place. So if it's going to take a year to produce this amazing content management system website, so it's not a flat website like we looked at previously with QuarkXPress. It's not where one guy's got it on their computer and they've got to update it. It's going to be a site which hundreds of people can contribute to, and it can be updated just online without any special software. But if the product isn't ready yet, the needs of the project are going to change. And then often it's too early to take decisions about technology. So 43% of the entire web, according to WordPress, uses WordPress. But I've got to say, looking at it again today, it is hideously complicated, not just for creating a theme, which was what I was showing you earlier, but actually just for users. WordPress has become so powerful that the end user who's just supposed to be adding some content can do all kinds of things. Now, they may not be things you want the end user to do. So at some point, those features got to be locked down. Or you could use Drupal. Drupal is far less elaborate than WordPress, but also, for a lot of reasons, a rather better system. And actually doing conversions to Drupal are relatively simple, but it doesn't offer the end user as many options. WordPress offers now so many options, it's too much. Drupal maybe offers less options. My organization that I work for now uses Drupal because we're managing sites in, I think, 70 languages now. We're in 120 countries. And if we tried to do it through WordPress, it would just be too difficult. So Drupal is a lot better for a really complicated requirement, but it might not be the right thing. It could be that actually flat HTML5 is going to be better, that it's always going to come back to the guy on QuarkXPress or whatever else you use. Or it could be bespoke PHP, and I've certainly done websites in bespoke PHP. If you don't know what bespoke PHP is, that doesn't matter because you don't need to. Another reason is when extensive testing is needed. If Apple brings out a new device, for example, a watch that can have access websites, you're going to need a lot more testing. But the most important one, in my experience, is that buy-in is needed. Let's just look at that. So here are the people that are going to be using your website. In the beginning, it's just the web design team. So right on the bottom there, right in the middle. The web design team, they if you start naively, without really knowing what you're doing, and say, well, let's just start on the project. And a lot of projects are started this way. If you start naively, the web design team comes up with something which they think is brilliant, and they take it to senior management and say, look at this new website which we have created in just 1 week. We've heard it's taken years to do this in the past, but now we've done it in 1 week. And it works great for the web design team. But then the PR and marketing team come in and they say, well, that's off-brand. You know, you might have a great website, but it's not our brand at all. And then after they've had a go, the sales and support team come in and say, well, that's wonderful, but we can't sell the product through this, or we can't support the product. You've got a beautiful pushing out your messages site, but we need something which will enable us to engage with customers straight away. We need something which is going to enable them to order online easily and have it delivered. And the support teams, and we've got to do support tickets. Then you've got your key customers who are usually your most demanding customers. And then you've got current customers who kind of understand your product, and then just visitors to the site who know nothing about your product or whatever it is you do. And certainly the charity I work for, maybe some of those visitors are actually quite opposed to what we do. So you've got to think about all of these things. That's my wife telling me that something is okay. And those things got to be thought about. So you get to what I would call the 5 steps of a website, of a big enterprise website. This doesn't apply to a 10-minute site you do. It doesn't apply to something you're doing for a one-man shop. But when it comes to the big ones, you do these 5 things. The first one is the brand. Now, you might say, well, hang on, the brand's already established. We know what the brand is. Well, actually, often all they've got is the logo and the typeface and the colors. For a website, that's not enough. For a website, they've got to know about tone of voice, about our house style in regard to spelling. Are we doing a separate US site, an international English site? What about different languages? What's our stance in relation to the reader? All these things have a huge impact. And in fact, when I left the health service in the UK and started my own business, I started it doing just branding, because what I saw went wrong more often than anything else, not just in websites, but in other communication, was the brand was not fully established before they started to build things on it. And then the brand just goes all over the place and it splurges and you end up with just a mess. And a lot of corporate sites still are just messes. So the second thing you've got to talk about is the function. What does it actually do? Now, if the website is just about the chief executive blogging once a month, then you can do that in WordPress or Drupal or anything without even having to do much design. It's the kind of thing that you could literally create in a weekend. But most sites these days have got other functions as well. It may be taking sales, it may be doing support, it may be booking events, it may be taking donations and so on. And all of those functions are obvious to everybody who wants a website, but everybody who wants a website sees different functions as being obvious. We're going to come back to that in a second. So you've got to establish what those functions are, and that's a really significant thing. Then you've got the creative bit where you actually come up with something which isn't just going to be yet another WordPress template or yet another box of sites where people look at it and go, oh, fine, I see your product. And those can work really well if you've got just one product and it's software and they can order it online and there's only 5 things to know about it. And there's quite a lot of things which I buy, like Topaz AI Enhancer Pro. It's a great product for video. It's just like this kind of one page for the product and you scroll all the way down. That's brilliant. But for most enterprise sites, you need a lot of creative to really let that site speak to you. And you've got really just about 30 seconds in which time the visitor decides what the site is about. It's not even they decide if they like it or not. They decide what it's about. And they might love it, but if they decide that it isn't about anything they're interested in, they won't come back. Or if they decide it's the wrong site because they want the parts site, this is the main sales site. There's a company which I've bought a lot of stuff from, and their sales site is brilliant. It's just gorgeous. It's great. It's fantastic. When you want to order a part for something that's broken, they've got a different site, and it's horrible. And although I love their products, I now think twice about buying because I know what it's going to be like to order something the second time around, or I say order a part. Then after that, you've got to get buy-in from all the different executive functions who are going to decide whether this is going to be perhaps funded because it costs more at every stage, but also whether it's going to be allowed out. And again, with this huge hospital site I was doing, we only got the final buy-in from the executive team the weekend before we were due to launch. And we would have spent a whole year and a lot of somebody else's money on a site that then never happened. And that can be a real problem. And then finally, you get coding. And coding is when the guys in anoraks with kind of geeky hair and everything, if you're one of those guys, we love you. When they come in and they take the creative work and they turn it into a site that actually functions. And often that's where things go wrong, because either the functions that were demanded are not actually achievable. That's possible, I've seen that happen. Or they weren't sufficiently communicated, and so the guys produce something and it's not what you were expecting. It doesn't look the same, it's maybe off-brand, or it doesn't do what you wanted. And then they say, well, it's okay, that'll be in version 2. And version 2 is 2 years down the line, and it never happens. So that's your 5 steps, and that really applies to any kind of big website. These are things that you do even if you're just creating a quick website in QuarkXPress as a kind of a one-off. So I created a website where we were going to show a YouTube video, and I had in my mind the brand, the function we wanted to show one YouTube video and get people to click and send us an email. The creative side, I actually used one of the Quark templates for that. I was really fast, but I already knew what I wanted in terms of pictures. The buy-in, there's only 10 people, but I still had to get them to buy in. And then the coding of it, well, okay, that was easy because I pressed the export button on Quark and it was done. But all of those things are happening. And in the meantime, you've got content coming in. So from underneath, at each step, people are saying, well, let's try it out with some content. Let's see what it looks like. And again, that content can change as you go. So let's come back to cost and functionality. I created this graph today. It's not based on scientific graphing, so don't say, well, I saw this graph and they must have done millions of hours of research on it. No, but this is my experience, is that even building a site that doesn't even do what you need costs money. So you can spend a lot of money. I heard recently about a guy who spent $16,000 on a site, and then one of my colleagues pointed out to him the $40 template that the designer had used to create it. Now, I'm sure the designer did more work than that, but even if it doesn't do what you want, it still costs money. So there's a kind of a point of saying, what do we absolutely need? What are the things that we've got to have? And then you go up the curve in terms of cost to what would we love to have in a golden world. And then if you're working with external providers, you've got what could we be persuaded to buy? And people will sell you all kinds of extras, which may be things that don't cost them much money, but are going to be highly profitable if they sell them to you. And if you just get everybody's functions and get everybody to put on the table what they want, you're going to end up at the top of this curve, not near the bottom. Now, there's a time when you've got to say, we need to only go with what we absolutely need. But then you've got to decide, what is it we absolutely need? Now, I want to offer you my life's work. This is the PR strategy, which has been published in various places, but this is kind of my great contribution. But I offer you this for free. It is worth slightly more than that. Any kind of communication, the website is a communication. You've got to begin by finding out what are our outcomes. So I'm going to start on the right. I'm going to go up to audiences and messages and delivery. They all link together. So what is an outcome? Well, we're going to have a website. That's not an outcome, that's an output. An outcome is what's the result in terms of the change in the way people think after this project's been successful. I used to sit down with PR clients and say, in a year's time, we're going to say this is the most successful campaign we've ever done. Now, what is this campaign going to look like for us to say that? What are the results going to have been? In what way will the world have changed? And it usually took about half of the time allotted for them to figure out what they really wanted. If I had an hour, I would spend half an hour just working on those outcomes. If I had a day, I would spend half a day on it. Because once you've fixed those, you've really fixed your functionality. There's no coming back. And so if you pick the wrong ones, you will end up producing a website or any other kind of communication which doesn't do the job you need. It may do the job specified, but that's not the same thing. And then, having fixed the outcomes, we go to the audiences. Who are we talking to? And I put these into three groups of decision makers, influencers, and gatekeepers. Decision makers, the people who actually are going to make a difference. They're actually going to buy the product, or they're actually going to quit smoking, or they're actually going to join your organization for a year, or whatever it is that you want to do. You've got influencers. Who do they listen to? When somebody else finds your website, and emails a link and says, "Oh, you've got to get to this." Who are those people? And then gatekeepers. They're people who can't make it happen, but they can stop it happening. When I was doing bus advertising in the UK, I wasn't advertising buses, I was advertising on buses. The bus companies actually had a list of rules, and you weren't allowed to break those rules. And if you did an advertisement which looked like it was one of those, they would simply scrap it. And it might even be pulled off the back of a bus as soon as an executive saw it, even while your campaign was running. So the gatekeepers are really important as well. And your corporate buy-in, the executive team, are one of those gatekeepers. So who have we got to persuade for this outcome to happen? And then the next one is messages. What are we telling people? What is it that they need to hear in order to persuade them, the audience, to do that, the outcome? What are those things? You don't have to always define those messages right at the beginning with a website, but ultimately the look and feel of that site is going to communicate those things. Even if you change the content, you change the headlines, it's still going to change it. And finally, how do we deliver that? That's the functionality, that's the bit which is going to require the coding. Before ever starting, you want to agree those things before you code anything at all, because any code that the coders write, when you haven't agreed this, is wasted code. It's literally wasted money. So the point of wireframing is to come up with a series of different, like, single sheets usually, which you can show to people, and you can show to the coders, you can show to the doctors and the nurses and the pediatricians and the anaesthetists and the community dentists and all the other kinds of people you're working with. Or you can show to the sales team and the repair team and the support team, whatever industry you're in. Everybody can look at it and kind of get the feel of what the website's going to be like. But usually people can't really see it until they actually see a website. So you can show PowerPoints, which are literally wireframes. People go, I don't get it. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's where QuarkXPress comes in. So why wireframe in QuarkXPress? Well, the first thing is it's brand-led. You can make sure that all the branding is right from the very first day. And one of the things that will scupper and has destroyed many web projects is that the web team come up with this great idea, but it's all off-brand. And the PR, communications and marketing team look at it and say, that is completely off-brand, we are striking that, and the program's dead. So getting the brand right from the beginning is really important. It's easy to do in QuarkXPress because you've already got your brand assets there. Secondly, and this is what we looked at with Flex, instant functionality. You can create a website and you can show it to them there and then. In fact, let's do that with this particular presentation, which I'm showing you on QuarkXPress. And now, whoa, it's on my web browser. It's actually a publication, and you can see that straight away. That is a kind of speed which you just never get with traditional wireframing, and particularly as you can do it with Flex, although often you're going to end up doing fixed. Then it's creatively responsive. You can literally sit around with people at a table and do that. It works with other collateral, by collateral other materials. So when you come to have to produce a brochure to go with it, and I've been in these places where the senior team, the executive team, want to see some stuff, but they want a report with everything in it, and then trying to convert what the web guys have done into something you can print is almost impossible. With Quark, it's very easy. And then it provides an unambiguous brief for the coders. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll see that these 5 things correspond with the 5 steps. So 1, it's on brand right from the beginning. You're not going to get stuck. You're not going to get cancelled by being off brand. 2, you can put the functionality in that you want. Okay, you can't put everything in, or if you do, you're going to have to start coding. But you can take snippets from here and there and put them to the HTML5 code section, or just use animations or YouTube, whatever you want. It allows that creative flexibility. You can keep creating. The creative people, which is you watching this, control the process. You haven't handed it over to the technical guys, and when you get it back, it looks like nothing. And then getting buy-in becomes very easy because you can provide the reports you need. And finally, when you hand it over to the coders, in most cases, they will not be simply taking your code and doing that conversion like I showed you with the theme converter, because life is just much more complicated and difficult than that. But what you show them will tell them if they fulfilled the brief or not. Ultimately, I'm going to finish here. Wireframing has got 3 goals. 1, you want to produce the site you actually want. And this is so important. I know it sounds obvious. You're probably thinking nobody would ever produce the site they don't want. I've seen so many web projects where at the end of a 6-month process, the site was handed over and the people who commissioned it said, this is completely not what we asked for. Even using wireframing, even using all the correct processes, it's actually quite hard to manage. QuarkXPress will make it easier. Secondly, you want to persuade the partners to buy into it. If your partners are just in your organization, that's one thing, though that can still be very difficult, particularly with a large organization. If you've got 3,000 people with strong opinions, like London Zoo, or like a big children's hospital, or like a big multinational charity, then it can be quite difficult to even agree what we are. But once you've got external partners involved, then it becomes much more difficult. And finally, you want to be able to publish your content easily. So when the site's all coded and it's ready, it's got to be easy for not the end web user, but the intermediate person, the person, doctor or a nurse or a salesperson or a marketing person or a frontline health worker or a frontline charity worker, whatever, to be able to type in their text, press the button, it's submitted to an editor who checks it, that it's all correctly spelled, and then presses it through. One of the reasons why I'm now moving away from recommending WordPress is that WordPress now offers so much that it's baffling to a new user, and you've got to have a week of training. But I used to train people on CMSs. After a week, if they don't use it within 24 hours, they've forgotten about it, and your basically your content is not going to happen. So that is wireframing. I know that was mostly not about QuarkXPress, but I hope you can make the creative leap. And if we'll move to questions now, but if you've got things you want to see happening, I may or may not be able to show them to you. And I know the screens are blurry, and I've tried to increase the size, but it only goes so far. But if you can guide your organization through this process and use QuarkXPress as your tool, you will dramatically increase your value to them if you're in-house, or your potential consultancy fee if you're external. Bunny, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. So let me just say, as a marketing person who has lived through designing or redesigning a lot of websites, and not just simple ones, wireframing and designers have been incredibly important to that process, because I know I need to see things, and as the person who's project managing, but also usually the person who's writing the copy, you know, I need to see what I need to do, what I need to write. So it's really important to partner with your designers in seeing where you're going to go. So this has been a great refresher course for me. So thank you very much for joining us for this. And at this point, I do want to open up the session to questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat feature. Because we do have, 15 or 20 minutes here if you would like to ask questions, and not just about what you heard today necessarily, but again, the whole theme of the series, which has been, looking at QuarkXPress in terms of digital publishing capabilities, especially around creating simple websites, as well as using it to help produce larger enterprise sites. So please raise your hand, Q&A, chat. What do you want to know? We'll give people a couple of minutes here to type in. Don't be shy. Now's your chance to ask what you want to know. So while we're giving people a chance to perhaps ask a question here, Martin, any other parting words of wisdom when it comes to websites and design?
Having done quite a few of these over the years, my feeling now is that doing it fast and what we absolutely need is the better end to be. Because the world keeps changing, and in many cases you can just add on pages which will look the same but are a different system, but the desire to have more and more features, which is kind of where WordPress has gone, ultimately makes it more cumbersome, more difficult.
Yep, no, I can agree with that as well. Okay, a couple of questions are coming in. Michelle says she uses brackets to put together pieces into a CMS a client has. Is there a way to bring that HTML into Quark to work with? I am only replacing one content area.
So, like most graphic web editors, QuarkXPress doesn't bring in HTML from elsewhere and then work on that. So you can include what they call snippets of HTML in a frame and have it operate that. But just being able to suck something in and then work with that is generally not what is going to happen. So with really simple HTML, QuarkXPress can import HTML, but I think that what you're talking about is going to be more complicated than that. I mean, I don't know brackets, so I can't comment further. But any kind of complex HTML importing, QuarkXPress is not the right answer to that question. It's the right answer to many questions, but not to that question. I see Bill has said something. Thank you, Bill. That's really very kind.
So what are the top trouble areas with WordPress in terms of complexity, and what should I watch out for?
Well, I did a WordPress site for a church a few years ago, and there was a lot of bright people there. And this was in a much earlier version of WordPress, and it was great, but afterwards, people came to me and said, it's really difficult to upload content into WordPress. And a lot of these were like doctors and lawyers and people. It wasn't just like anyone. Because it's so flexible, WordPress offers you blocks and all kinds of ways of changing the layout, partly because it's been quite hard to customize themes. Now, if you're doing it in Quark, you're going to create the theme in the way you want it. But most of the themes you get for WordPress are quite simple, and the ones that look really nice are not particularly customizable. So WordPress now allows you to do that. Now there are plugins for WordPress which allow you to lock down what the user can see. And in the end, for that particular site, and that was quite a few years ago now, I actually locked down a lot of the stuff so that they could only make the changes I wanted them to change and not be confused by all the other questions WordPress was asking. However, the problem with plugins is they're not updated often as fast as WordPress is. So if you update WordPress in order to be up to date for security purposes, because WordPress is not only the most used system in the world, it's also the most hacked system, and so people are always putting out security updates. If you update WordPress, it could be that your plugin you're relying on is no longer working. And in fact, with my own private site, because I've changed from what I was doing before to what I'm doing now, it's kind of died because when it updated, it broke the plugins it was relying on. I haven't had the patience to fix it. So much flexibility, much complexity.
Yep. So, question from Oliver. When you talk about Flex, are you referring to the web standard or a product? A little bit of both.
So Flex is the web standard, and QuarkXPress produces things according to the Flex standard. Actually, if you look at the Quark documentation, at a particular point, it'll tell you to go and look at the Flex documentation, which is lovely, except the Flex documentation is written by techies for techies. So mostly QuarkXPress just works, but if you want it to do something that is difficult, and you then go onto the Flex standard site, then you are engaging with web tech. And there's always an interface between real people and the people who make the web work, and it's not always an easy interface. But Flex, I think, is quite a mature standard now, so Quark is working to that. Flex is not a Quark proprietary product, it's a standard. It's not the only standard for doing responsive websites, so there are other ways of doing them, and actually Quark offers one of those, which is by doing fixed layouts and having JavaScript switch between them depending on the output size. And for a lot of things, that would ultimately be a better solution, but it's more time intensive to create it. And again, a lot of big websites that are being wireframed and have got stakeholders will end up with the coders doing that, and they might even tell you they're using Flex because they've learned to not explain things to the customer. Yeah.
Okay. So, couple of other questions here, Martin. Is it easy to work with several people when you create a website with Quark and then use WordPress?
I would say it's always easier to work with several people at the kind of the earliest stage. So when things are simplest, it's easier to involve more people. When you reach the point of WordPress, most of the decisions have been made. So if you're going to use Quark, if they all are Quark users, it's really easy to use it. You can even square off bits of the page for them to work on separately. But if they're not Quark users, you can still provide them with PDFs. You can provide them with PNGs they can write on. You can get them to sit around your computer. I know designers hate people sitting around the computer, but actually, when they come into your office and they see you've got this huge screen and you've got like pens, that you're like Captain Kirk to them, or Picard for more recent people. And sit around and say, what do you want? And they go, can I have that there? And you move it there. And they go, wow, we've never seen anything so responsive in our entire lives. And actually being seen to be the responsive designer can do more for you than the content can. So for my workflow, I would get people to sit around my computer and say, I like that, or I want that. But I'd also take them into another room and do brainstorming. And you've got to know when to get away from the screen and talk about functional and conceptual things. Like for the Children's Hospital, for example, we walked around the building And we said, what does a parent want the night before they come to the hospital? So what are the things that parents care about? And we discovered that parents, they want to know about parking, they want to know about traffic, they want to know what happens if they arrive late for their appointment. They want to know if they'll be able to stay overnight if their child is really, really ill. It's those kinds of things. They don't want to know about the composition of the board or the number of awards the hospital's won, which are things people typically put in the front. And so sometimes you've got to get away from the computer, walk around the building, talk to parents or whatever it is your customers are. And that's the way to create truly great websites as opposed to just reproducing whatever gunk somebody else down the road did.
Yep, it all goes back to the audience, right, Martin? What does the audience care about? What's in it for them? That's always the guiding principle. So a couple of other questions. So Mary, I think, was thinking that we might actually be showing a demo of how to do wireframing. That's not actually something that we covered here or in the prior sessions. This is more of just a discussion about the importance of wireframing and sort of the stages that you go through. Any other tips, though, that you want to offer on wireframing or perhaps how to approach it, Martin?
Let me show you this page, which is, this is like typically where wireframing might be fairly early on in the process. And you've just got this, which looks like kind of nothing. And then somebody comes in and says, look, I've got to have, let me just find my my Flex layout blocks. Somebody says, I've got to have on the bottom, for compliance reasons, a section which will enable us to, I don't want it there, let's have a look. I want it there. No, I don't want it there. Okay, trying to do this in real time is more difficult. I want to add another section to this, and there it is, in which we're going to put our copyright and such things as that. So in QuarkXPress, it's really easy to put those in, and I can then just put some text in here. In fact, I could even just actually insert placeholder text, and then you can sort of see it. And as we kind of build it up, people start saying, oh, I'm starting to get it now. So, for example, I've put here post, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything to anybody if they aren't used to it. So post title, how to book tickets for, I don't know, Janice and the Janettes. This is not a real band. If you were in a real band called this, I do apologise, I just made that up. And someone says, what's that for? You say, well, it's okay. I'm going to show you, we're going to put in just a picture there just to show you how it works. The wireframing doesn't connect with, so this is the QuarkXPress stock images, and we're going to put that guy in there. And they said, well, what does this look like on a website? And they said, okay, well, let's have a look. And then we're going to just do a quick HTML page preview. And that will then come up in Safari, yeah. And there we've got it. And now we can start changing the shape of the page, and suddenly they're beginning to get it. Oh, you mean those things do that like on those other websites? And it's one of these things like fonts, which are obvious, but people have never thought about. And so when they're facing the issue of what font to choose, they haven't got a clue. And people will spend an hour choosing a font for a letter when they just should have checked the corporate font. So again, with doing like menus and things, this is a really simple, just basic wireframe right now. And this is actually the more advanced than you'd usually get with a wireframe done in PowerPoint. On PowerPoint, it would literally just be the boxes, and we can turn off the guides there, and you can have more seeing what's going to be the real page. And so we're going to have a menu up at the top here. Look at that, and we're going to have what happens to that picture, or when we flex it, you're going to see different parts of the picture there. And again, for the tech guys, it's like, yeah, we know all that. For the orthopedic nurse who was sent to be part of your stakeholder group, it's magic, and they've never seen it before. And wireframing is essentially a process of each person then saying, but I've got to have one of those. Or I was on the website belonging to, I don't know, the Mineral Hospital in Bath, that's a real hospital, and they've got a whole thing about every board member on every page. And then you can say, well, you could say, that's not going to work, it's a stupid idea. That's not going to really build the team. So they said, well, why don't we try that? Why don't we put that in and see how that feels? So we put another section in there, and now we're going to put a collection of pictures in there. So I put picture there, picture there, picture there, and a picture there. And again, I'm going to get some stock photography to make that work. Stock images, where have they gone? So my website's getting slow now. I just can type face in here. Probably doing it in all caps. So I'm going to put now here. I doubt any of these would actually be board members. We'll put him there, and her there, and her there, and that guy here, or that girl here. And again, the person's actually, maybe the board members isn't what we want here, but maybe pictures of our customers might be, and somebody gets the idea. So wireframing is in the beginning, it's a creative way of helping people who don't naturally visualize things to visualize them. But later on, that wireframe is going to be the instruction to the coders, and the more explicit the instruction is, the more exactly they're going to get it.
Yep, definitely. So this is a little bit of a departure. The question is not necessarily about, well, it's not about websites, but I think we've got a couple of students joining us today. They're new to QuarkXPress, and they're wondering how to learn to convert a Word document so that it will have a cover page, a table of contents, and various segments that could be used as a student workbook. Any advice there, Martin?
Okay. The easiest way to learn to do it is to do it. So let's create a new document, new project, and I'm going to go to print, as it's for a workbook. I wouldn't usually take the margins quite like this. I'd usually have slightly different margins, but sorry, realised I didn't complete doing that. Let's try again. Right, so I want to have automatic text box. That's crucial. And with that text box, I'm now going to import with file import. So I should have shown you how to do that. So it's file import, or you can do Command E on a Mac, Control E on a PC. And let's go to something I've been working on. So this is called, so I've just submitted this for a competition. It's a novel. So you are the first to see this. And I'm going to just use you for all things. And it will take a moment to work on that. And it's also telling me that the font's not the same. But it's now imported this, and it's kept the Word style sheets. So not only is that in the font, which it had particular submission requirements, not only in the font that it required, but also with the style sheet names. Let me just get rid of that, and we'll go to style sheets, which is in Window Style Sheets, and you'll see it's imported all these Word style sheets. And so for example, that I clearly had Word page breaks in, but in QuarkXPress I actually want to set that to start paragraph on the next odd page. And here we go. So now it doesn't start that until then, and the same thing here. And again, this was a font which I'd used on a different computer, not available on QuarkXPress, not because it's not available in QuarkXPress, because it's not on this computer. Now I could load that font in, but actually I'm going to go to Utilities, Usage, and I'm going to look at that font. What font is it? Oh, it's Helvetica Neue Faux Bold. Terrible. That's a typical problem with Word. So let's going to change that to Helvetica Neue Bold. Word was fine with that, but we shouldn't use it in print. And now I'm going to just replace all of those. And what else have we got? Ebrima. I've got no idea what that's doing. So I want to have a look at that. Oh, that's there. Well, again, why did Word use that? I have no idea. So we're going to replace that, and I'm going to make that Helvetica Neue, and we're going to go for Helvetica Neue condensed black. And okay, all those are going to be replaced now. It'll take a moment because it is 75,000 standard words, or by word count 85,000, and that's done. And most of Word's own, I mean, the formatting of this is really simple because it's a novel, and novel's got simple formatting. I could also say that every chapter is going to be on its own new page. So start paragraph are on next page, but it will import Word's formatting. It won't import complex word layouts as such. If you've got lots of boxes, that probably is not going to work. But anything in flowing text in Word, including tables, Quark will import those. You just do it. So let's just do that again. So Command E or File Import, and I'm going to find that file called Windsor Space, it's submission version, and just looking down here, I've got convert quotes on. That's not actually necessary. I'm going to include footnotes. I could include tables. There actually aren't any, but I could include them. Include style sheets, yes. Include hyperlinks, include inline pictures, yes. So even the pictures which are in Word will come in. There aren't any in this. And now again, it's asking me to resolve them. And this time, because I've already worked out my style sheets, I'm just going to go use existing, and it will conform itself to the changes in the style sheets I made. So no longer am I getting a complaint about fonts. And it's really easy. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Martin. So again, just want to remind everyone, if you missed any of the prior webinars in this series, you can see those and the tutorials by going to our YouTube channel. Access our YouTube channel from quark.com. That social media YouTube icon is down in the bottom left at the bottom of the site. And also, if you have any suggestions for other webinars, other things you would like us to elevate and provide special training on, you can send those suggestions to info@quark.com. The website series here we've been doing for the past 3 months has definitely been really popular. And we appreciate your input and are still working on some other additional tutorials for you, but always feel free to send us ideas. So with that, if we don't have any other questions, let me just double check chat here. I think we're going to sign off for today. And everybody, again, thank you for joining us. And Martin, as always, a pleasure. Thank you for all your help and knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.